Hey, it's George DiGianni with Authentic Health is what we're calling ourselves, myself and Dr. Webster. We're going to have Dr. Webster come on in a moment, but we're talking about exercise with purpose. When you go into a gym, if you do you have a specific plan in mind? And if you do, what is the plan? Does it move you in the direction that you want to move, or is it moving you away from that direction? The reason I say that is because many people will have an idea of what they need to do. Hey,
Hi, George.
many people will have an idea of what they need to do or think they need to do to reach a certain goal. What I was saying, Dr. Webster, many people will have a purpose or a desire, and let's say they move in this direction over here, but they really want to move in this direction over here. They're working against their intended goal or purpose.
No doubt about it. And when you talk about different types of exercise and different purposes or different goals, what you'll find is most types of exercise aren't necessarily, not in most cases, they're not working against you necessarily, but they certainly may not be helping you achieve your goal optimally. And I hope we can help people waste less of their time and get a lot more out of their exercise, because so many people are strapped for time as it is already, and so many people just simply don't enjoy exercise, and that's fine. But if you are willing to put in 10, 12, 20 minutes a day, if you do the right type of exercise, you're going to find that you can get a lot out of it, even in pretty short, brief bouts of exercise. So that's what I hope people get out of this, is the best way to most efficiently use their time and get the most out of their exercise.
So one of the things that I know through launching Genetic Direction is when your results come back, it says, George, to properly utilize glucose, you need to do more strength training than you need to do. Nice palm there, Doc.
We got to get it right. We got to match.
You need to do more strength training than you do more aerobic training. And so one of the things I know for me is that I don't have to go into a gym and waste time doing so much of both, first of all. Second, we know that as we age, the studies are coming out all over the place saying that we need to do more strength training over aerobic training as we age. And what's interesting is we find the reverse tends to happen, where people don't want to put in the effort with strength training. They kind of default, whether it's through marketing or they don't want to deal with pain, into walking or the elliptical or the bike. And while that's not terrible, it's better than just sitting down. You're still losing 1% of your muscle mass every year from the time you're 30 years old. And so aerobic training doesn't give you that muscle mass back or slow down the loss of muscle mass. So when we're talking about exercise with purpose today, it's imperative that you identify first, what is your purpose? A marathon? You want to put on muscle mass? You want to slow muscle mass loss? What is your purpose? Is it fat loss? And then once you identify what that purpose is, it's so important for you to then recognize the exercise or the effort you're putting in may be working against your intended goal. And I'll finish up here. What often happens, Doc, you've seen this, I've seen this many times in 30 years, where people just give up.
Yeah, unfortunately. And George, going back to your point of how we quote unquote need more strength training as we get older, I would agree with you. And I know you want the best for all of your listeners. I want the best for all of my patients. And I'm going to tell them why it's important for them to have strength training and maintain the muscle that they have, especially as they get older, especially with females who have a tendency to lose muscle and lose bone mass more rapidly, maybe than their male counterparts in some situations. So I will emphasize that, and I'll stress the importance of it. But what if the person's goal is to run a marathon? Is that person's needs or the best type of exercise for them to reach that particular goal, is it not more cardiovascular type exercise or cardiovascular exercise to begin with? So I would say in some situations, you might find that more aerobic cardio might help you reach your goal if that happens to be what you're going after. But not most of the cases, I would say. I would like to, if you don't mind, go through a few studies that I've seen recently on exercise as it relates to different health benefits, if you would like to talk about that now.
So we can do that, but before you do, one of the things I want to share for everyone who does listen to my radio show, whether it's online or in Dallas, Fort Worth, It's on a station called The Ticket. I've been there about 21 years. You don't want to miss the show December 15th. It's at 6:50 a.m. Central Time. Dr. Webster will be on with me. By the way, Doc, tomorrow we're talking about intermittent fasting and all the myths associated with it, why certain people struggle with it, the different types of the intermittent fasting, the benefits of it. That'll be on my radio show tomorrow, 96.7 FM, or you can go
Saturday.
You can go.
Tomorrow's Thursday.
Oh, I'm sorry, Saturday, whatever. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or you can go to theticket.com and you can listen live. That's how my parents and other people around the world listen to the show. But December 15th, I'll have the most significant message I've ever had since beginning my show on The Ticket. So if you listen, you'll want to listen to that show, hopefully live. Dr. Webster will be on with me. All right, so go ahead now, Doc. I know I interrupted you.
Well, I have 4 studies, and what I want to do is just bring to mind the huge benefits that you get from some type of exercise. This isn't really exercise specific at this point, but this is going to get people thinking about all of the different potential things that exercise can help with. So the first one came out of, I saw it published in Harvard Health Publishing from the Harvard Medical School. And we all know that's the best source of fake news, right? Harvard, George?
Yes, sir.
Harvard
Yes,
man?
yes, sir. Make fun of all of us Harvardians. Did you know we were called Harvardians?
That's ridiculous. In a study done at the University of British Columbia, researchers found that regular aerobic exercise, the kind that gets your heart and sweat glands pumping, appears to boost the size of the hippocampus, the brain area involved in verbal memory and learning. So I bring this up because it's not what you typically think of for exercise. You typically think of, I'm going to lose some weight, I'm going to maybe have better endurance, I might help my cardiovascular health, I might put on some muscle. That's about as far as most people think. But improving the size of certain parts of the brain, that's pretty important, I think. That's pretty cool. There's another one, Dr. Susie Hong, who studies exercise and the immune system activation at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine. She says, and this is really awesome, the anti-inflammatory effects of exercise are likely one of the underpinnings of its effects against cardiovascular disease, diabetes, certain cancers, and neurodegenerative conditions, and more. Previous studies from her lab have shown that exercise is linked to changes in the secretion of stress hormones like adrenaline. And she goes on to say that in order to maximize this benefit, and this is, I wanted to bring this sentence up for a specific reason. In order to maximize this benefit, repeated and regular exercise is recommended.
Yeah,
so
not
just one time.
Just the first 3 months of the new year.
There you go. And when she was doing these studies, what she found, interestingly, was there were measurable effects after a single bout of exercise. When she would measure pre and post levels of these inflammatory chemicals and hormones like adrenaline, she was literally seeing changes in one session. But here's the thing. She said she would measure it, and then it was quickly back to normal. But she said if you keep doing it day after day, week after week, month after month, you get those same anti-inflammatory and suppression of your stress hormones almost constantly. But it takes a while for that to happen. It's basically your body has to slowly shift to more of an anti-inflammatory state. And each time you exercise, you improve that shift. I brought this up because a patient of mine was just talking to me yesterday. He said, Doc, if you can come up with the magic bullet for sleep, he said, you're going to be a millionaire. And I said, there is no magic bullet. I said, have you been exercising? He said, well, no. I said, okay, you have to exercise. And don't exercise once and see if it helps you sleep. And then if it doesn't help you sleep, don't say, well, that didn't work, so try to move on to the next magic bullet. There's no magic bullet. You do the right things. You exercise regularly for a long period of time. You eat right for a long period of time. You take the nutrients that you need for a long period of time, and they all add up. And pretty soon, you might find that you're sleeping better.
So let's go back for a moment. You talked about gaining benefits in the hippocampus. So, the brain gets all these great benefits. One of the things I've been talking about on the radio for all these years is how you have to identify the person's pain point to then motivate them to do something they know they should do, and we've been beating them over the head about eating a certain way and or exercising a particular way. And so if you have trouble focusing at work and your cohorts are getting ahead of you and you're not able to meet quotas, or you're not focused in school and you want to be focused and your legs shaking and you're biting your nails, and all of that is usually associated with inflammation. Somebody who's not eating well, also not sleeping well, right? They have blood glucose that's just all over the place. So identify what your pain points are instead of just taking a pill or a drink to try to address the symptom. Why not address the cause? And the cause might be something that's on your mind, but consistent exercise brings about sustainable results.
No doubt about it. And the results are so broad and diverse. There was a study published in the July 2017 volume of Prevention Medicine. It found that people who exercise regularly have telomeres that are 140 base pairs longer than their average sedentary counterpart. That equates to 9 years younger.
So tell people what telomeres are, because I think it's real important. We did a show on this a lot, or I did. I don't know if you were with me a long time ago.
Telomeres are basically the end caps to your chromosomes. And as we age, they degrade and they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And the telomeres are necessary for replication of your cells. So we break down our cells, destroy our cells, and then we create new cells to replace those old cells regularly. Some tissues do that on a daily basis, like the gastrointestinal system, for example. Others do it very slowly, and some, like your brain cells, may not do that at all. But when those telomeres get so short to a certain point, that replication can no longer occur. So that's pretty much the end of the cell life, is what that is.
Right.
It's a great measure of your physiological age.
What I want to add to that is that through your lifestyle, you have the ability to slow the replication or speed it up. And so when you have that dead cell, like you just talked about, through your lifestyle, your choices, or if you have the monkey mind and you're always in a stressed state, you have systemic inflammation throughout your body, and it's chronic, so it's ongoing for long periods of time, that also creates a fast replication and shortening of those telomeres. And when you're doing that, you're dying faster. Or when you're doing that, you're inviting disease. That's how important it is to exercise, and do so with consistency. We didn't even say anything about diet because we've been going there. Everybody knows what to do. We'll hit some of that in the future, but just exercise.
Just exercise by itself, absolutely. 9 years difference. That was pretty astounding when I saw that.
So
the last one I want to bring up.
Doc, let me add to that, because this was not something you mentioned or in the study. One of the other things that we know is that telomere replication, or the speed of it, is also done in, let's say, bodybuilders or powerlifters. When you stress the body like that, you're not staying young, you're actually aging faster. What we found is telomere health specific to exercise replicates the slowest and stays the longest with moderate intensity strength training. And I don't know if you're aware of that in that study.
Well, the study did look at different intensity levels. And the problem with this is a study's definition of high intensity is very different than your and my definition of high intensity. You and I might say high intensity would be what a bodybuilder or a professional powerlifter might achieve. That's high intensity in my mind. In their mind, high intensity is something like walking 30 or 45 minutes, 7 days a week.
Wow.
So it's
so I'm going to die in a week.
They basically differentiated between the people who are highly active, moderately active, low activity levels, and those who are completely sedentary. And you saw that the sedentary was the big problem. Even when you went from sedentary to low activity, maybe taking a walk twice a week, you got huge benefits. And then there was even more benefit going to moderate from low, and then even more going from moderate to high. But like I said, high was simply taking a long walk every day. That's about all it takes. But you get huge benefits just from that. So what happens if you go even beyond that and do really optimal exercise, and optimal diet, and optimal supplementation, and optimal stress relief, and all those things? They all benefit or impact your telomeres and your basically your rate of aging. It's as simple as that.
So I'm in the gym.
The last one.
So I'm in the gym in the morning, and I see this all too often with many, many, many people, mostly women, not for any particular reason, just that's what I see. They're up almost the highest level, if not the highest level, on the treadmill.
Okay.
Okay. And then they have the speed on faster than they would typically walk. And they're holding on to the front. Wait, they're leaning back, and they're taking kind of these drop foot steps. You know what I mean? Because the belt is pulling them, and they're taking their foot and it's being pushed down, versus letting go, leaning forward, and actually pressing back with the ball of their foot, right? And using their own body. And so if you do this, and let's say you do it for an hour and you feel good about yourself, is it better than sitting on the couch? Yes. However, you might wonder why you're not getting the results you'd like to have. My suggestion is, if you do this for an hour, lower the elevation by about half, keep the same speed, don't hold on, and do it for 20 minutes. What you will have effectively done, even though you've decreased the elevation, just by not holding on and using your own body weight and having to lean forward, you've increased your intensity. Therefore, I guarantee you will not be able to do it for an hour.
Yeah, well, absolutely, George. I'm glad you brought that up. Those rails are there for people who are rehabbing, who literally can't stand without holding something, or if you have a problem where your knee gives out and you have to grab a hold of it. Otherwise, you should be walking like you normally walk, swinging your arms and balancing yourself. That all trains different parts of the brain,
yes.
And you get other benefits other than just simply the benefit of your leg. If you're going to just hang on to something and push with your leg, why not just get on an exercise bike? It's doing the same thing.
So before we go further, I want you to expand upon that. It does different things to your brain. Since we talked about a little brain earlier, I want you to create that connection. What is it doing when we're swinging our arms versus holding on?
Okay, when you swing your arms, what happens if you watch somebody whose brain is functioning like it's supposed to, and they go walking, as their left leg goes forward, their right arm goes forward at the same time. That's called a cross-crawl mechanism. It's a wired mechanism in the internal ancient parts of the brain called the brain stem. And it's something that develops when you are a baby and you finally are able to push yourself up, lift your head up, and start crawling. Try to crawl without doing left leg, right arm at the same time. It's not possible. If you go right arm, right leg at the same time, you fall over. So babies learn how to do this back and forth cross-crawl mechanism, and that wires this part of the brain. The beautiful part about this is when they do that, that gets the rest of their brain starting to develop and fire. It controls centers that control anxiety levels. I've seen people who come in with tremendous anxiety, and I watch them march in place, and they can't do it. I tell them, okay, get some knee pads, go down. Your exercise is simply crawling around for 10 to 20 minutes of the day on your hands and knees, and come back. And they come back, and they're just like, I can't believe how much better I feel, and all I've been doing is crawling. And I say, well, stand up and march in place now. And they start swinging their arms naturally. And it swings in concert with the proper leg. It's because they're starting to develop those circuits in their brain. So when you have a baby, don't take them from when they're strong enough to hold onto your hand. Don't lift them up and try to walk them around like that just because they're able to. You're doing them a disservice, and you're ultimately causing them a lifetime of anxiety because they never developed that proper cross-crawl mechanism, which is fundamental to the development of the rest of their brain.
I have a lot of funny going through my head right now, thinking about these patients in your office crawling. You need to do a video of that. It'll go viral.
Okay. Right. Well, I just tell them to do it at home.
So let's talk specific. Hold on. We have somebody who asked or a question or mentioned something. Nice, yin yang thing. Okay, so it's not a question. By the way, for anyone who's watching right now, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment area, and Dr. Webster will and I will address them. But let's go down the list. And for the ones that you want to expand upon, when we're talking about exercise with purpose, fat loss, do we want to hit that first?
Might as well. I mean, that's probably the number one goal of anybody who decides they're going to exercise would probably be that, hey, I need to lose some weight. Interestingly, that's maybe one of the things in the research when you talk about weight loss specifically. Weight loss is not that easy to achieve with exercise alone. You get some weight loss. The problem is weight loss can cause other things to happen in your life depending on who you are and what your genetic makeup is. Some people that start exercising, actually eat more food, and they counter all of the benefits they get from burning those extra calories. And it doesn't take a lot. Other people eat even more and they start gaining weight when they start exercising. And then you have this other group that is me, for example. When I exercise, I actually have a suppressed appetite, and it's easy for me to lose weight the more I exercise.
So
but it's about a third and a third.
Let me expand on that, because a couple of years ago, someone came out and he was lambasted by people like you and me, even though we didn't do it, but I mean our other professionals. He said specifically that exercise makes people fat. And what he was saying, based on what you just said, is when someone's exercising, their metabolism increases, they're gaining some muscle, therefore they're more hungry and they're eating more. Well, while that's not a terrible thing, it's all about choice. And if your choice of food that you're eating is poor, then you're actually working against your intended goal of fat loss and you gain weight. The other thing we found out is that walking did not increase the metabolism. Did not. So if you're walking, you're not going to increase your metabolism, you're not increasing muscle, therefore you're not changing the shape of your body. However, you're also not going to be starving and making, feeding your face with a lot of food. So it's kind of, you have to weigh your options and make sure that you're going to commit if you're going to do strength training. Yeah, you'll get the shape you want, but you'll also have to make better choices.
Okay, I want to clarify a few things, because I think the listener would be very confused from what you said. First of all, walking may not stimulate the metabolism, but it does burn a lot of calories.
Yes.
So you're burning calories. You're not going to have this afterburn effect where your metabolism is increased 2 hours or 20 hours after you go walking. It's not going to do that. But while you're walking, you're burning a reasonable amount of calories. So let's not get away from walking or think that we're not recommending that you walk. We in fact are. We want you to be active. And the more active you are, the more calories you burn, and the easier it will generally be for you to lose weight. Also, all of the studies that I talked about, George, were all basically on the level of exercise intensity that is walking. That's how they do studies these days is, are you sitting on your butt all week, or are you exercising, or are you going out and taking a walk for about 120 total minutes a week, which is just a 20-minute walk. It's not a lot to get these profound benefits that we've seen. The other thing is, when that guy said exercise will make you fat, that's nonsense. It doesn't. Eating more will make you fat. Exercise will make you go the opposite way.
Well, hold on.
way.
You know what he was doing? It was the sensational headline to get you to read it. But what he said essentially makes sense. If you put on more muscle, you increase your metabolism, therefore you're going to be more hungry throughout the day. I got it. It's usually user error. That's why people fail, whatever the goal is that they're trying to achieve. It's user error. It's not always the program. And that, in this case, that's what happens. You put on more muscle, you hadn't been used to it, all of a sudden you're more hungry, and you're reaching for that candy when you walk out of your office that's there, right? Or you're too busy to eat, and all of a sudden you scoff all this food down. You think, well, I'll exercise it off. You cannot out-exercise your fork.
Right. But one thing you can do is realize that a lot of these studies recently that have come out are maybe done on short time intervals. If you have never exercised and you start exercising and you test yourself over 6 months and you don't control for anything else, meaning that you start exercising and you allow yourself to eat whatever you feel like you're eating, you might initially be more hungry. You might initially give in and eat more foods. But if you control the food and say, I'm going to eat exactly like I have been, I'm going to measure it, and so that I know I'm not eating any more calories, I'm not eating any more carbs, I'm going to eat exactly the same. If you do that, exercise will make you lose weight 100% of the time, guaranteed.
Right.
So that's the big deal.
But Doc, the caveat is if you do that. Most people don't have the discipline to do that. So this is why I know they're doing these studies based on walking and not strength training, because they know the majority of the people who are exercising are not doing strength training. They want to do the lowest level thing they possibly can to get off their butt and gain benefit, and they're going to walk. That's why they do these studies on walking.
And my point of bringing this up and want to be clear about this is that a lot of people think if I start exercising and exercise intensely, especially, then that gives me the ability to eat whatever I want. And that's what I want people to understand. You can't do that. You have to at least keep your diet the same, if not better, and then start exercising. That's when you get the results, not if you just eat whatever you want and say, well, I exercise, I'll burn it off. You won't burn it off. It's almost impossible to burn off bad eating. Eating a 500-calorie cheeseburger is so easy. And for that matter, not eating a 500-calorie cheeseburger is easy. 500-calorie difference in one day is enormous. That's basically a pound per week. You're either going to gain it or you're not going to gain it. or you're going to lose it or you're not going to lose it based on 500 calories a day. What's easier, George? Not eating a cheeseburger or exercising to burn 500 calories more during that day? I don't even know what that'd be, like 2 hours of exercise? It's ridiculous. You can't burn through a bad diet. It just doesn't work.
So your signal is pretty bad right now, Doc. You're going in and out. Did we tackle fat loss enough? Did you know, when we talk about exercise with purpose and we're saying fat loss, did we already, is that enough? Or can we go on to maybe strength or mass?
I think what we've done so far is we've tackled it from weight loss standpoint and not necessarily fat loss. Okay. So when you want to look at weight loss, that's a problem. When you measure weight only, you run into problems when you measure exercise versus weight loss, because what happens when you lose weight, or when you exercise, excuse me, is that you might lose some body fat, but you also might gain some muscle. So when you gain 3 pounds of muscle and lose 4 pounds of fat, at the end of the study, you only lost 1 pound of weight. But yet, isn't 3 pounds of muscle gain and 4 pounds of fat loss, isn't that a lot better than just saying I lost 1 pound, which might, in a scientific study, that's the same as 0. They just throw that out and say it's not even significant, yet you made a 7-pound shift in body composition, which is very significant. So you have to look at fat loss versus just pure weight loss. And when it comes to fat loss, higher intensity exercise does seem to be quite good at maintaining muscle and losing fat at the same time. Whether you're going to lose a lot of pounds or not, is really basically up to diet more than exercise.
And I've said for many years, it's not what you weigh, it's where you weigh.
Good point. Yep.
Right.
You want to move on to other.
You can have one person who weighs 200 pounds. Right. Let's say you have twins. One weighs 200 pounds, doesn't eat at all, doesn't eat well at all, doesn't exercise. The other one exercises and eats well. They're going to have completely different shapes, yet they're twins. And even if they're both still thin, the muscle to fat ratio will be different. Their CRP, their C-reactive protein will be low. Therefore, they'll be healthier. Their cholesterol will be healthier, and on and on and on and on and on.
And like I mentioned, they're going to live longer. They're going to have less depression, which I didn't even get to that study, but there's good studies showing exercise is equal to depression, antidepressant medications in the short term. In the long term, antidepressant medications are not a good predictor for a person's level of depression. The only good predictor for a person's level of depression 1 year after you start is whether the person exercised regularly or not. So that's pretty huge. So you get those benefits. Even if you weigh the same, you're going to get all these other health benefits.
Let's get into when we talk about exercise with a purpose, let's get into strength now. When women think of strength training, they often think of big soccer legs or big muscles. Strength and muscle mass are not always the same. They're off a little bit. They're not always the same. So why don't we talk?
Right. And if you look at the people who do this professionally and they have one goal versus the other, a bodybuilder and a power lifter or an Olympic weightlifter, they don't look the same. And they also don't work out the same. You think they're both basically in the business of lifting weights, and they are, but they do it differently. A bodybuilder, if you watch a bodybuilder work out, they do higher rep lifts. They do a lot of really slow movements, and that's how you build the big volume in the muscle, the muscle hypertrophy. A bodybuilder won't be as strong as you might think he is. They're going to be strong, of course. They're living in the gym. But when you compare him to a professional power lifter or a professional Olympic weightlifter, those weightlifters might not look as big. They're certainly not as bulky and well-defined as the bodybuilder, but they're stronger than the bodybuilder. But they're not doing those slow reps where they're grinding out 12 reps over, maybe like 45 seconds to a minute. They might be doing heavier weights, and they might do them a lot more ballistically in a lot of cases to where they get that strength benefit or that power benefit, especially in the case of an Olympic lifter. They want to build explosive lifts so they can get weight from the ground above their head. They have to build speed and strength at the same time. A bodybuilder doesn't care about how fast they can move a weight when all they're trying to do is do a double bicep pose and make their muscles look impressive. So it's quite different. The other thing is, in either of those cases, strength is your goal, or if strength is your goal, the last thing you want to do is do exercise that makes you breakdown muscle, which that's your long duration cardio, your excessive walking and whatnot, that actually puts you in a breaking down or a catabolic state, which makes you probably in most cases lose muscle mass and lose strength, versus being in an anabolic state, which is what bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and eating excessive calories does. It puts you in an anabolic or a growth state.
So let's also talk about the trends, how a bodybuilder's movements do not translate to real life or athletic performance. When a bodybuilder exercises, they're doing lateral raises. See if you can be like this, right, for their shoulders, movements like that you don't use in real life if you're a football player or whatever, right? They're on a bench, therefore they have something behind them. They can push away from the bench, therefore you can lift more or push more. But if you try to translate even half of that amount of weight into a person that's coming at you and you're going to push back and you don't have a bench or a support behind you, good luck with that. It doesn't work that way. And so that's why we find the football player, and it doesn't have to be football players, but people who are athletes have so much more strength than the bodybuilder, depending on the movement. Now, if you take
depending on how you measure it, if
you take an athlete to try to do bodybuilder movements, he or she will not be able to do it as effectively because that's not what they practice. So it all depends on the goal. Exercising with purpose, right? Years ago, I had the bodybuilder mentality, and I used to do those lateral raises and other things. But just think, and I know I'm going off on a tangent for a moment, but this is also exercising with a purpose. If you're trying to keep your shoulders healthy, the last thing you want to do is have a weight that's at your wrist, and all the forces are transferred into your shoulder. Look how far away from my body that is. So the further away it is, the less leverage you have, the more strain it is on your shoulders. Is there another way to gain strength in your shoulders? Absolutely. It's called push-ups, pull-ups, and deadlifts. Now think about this for a moment.
Push-ups, pull-ups, deadlifts.
Push-ups, pull-ups, and deadlifts. Work all 400 pairs of muscles in the body. Your shoulders are getting a workout. Do they get big? No, because you're not doing bodybuilder movements. Are you staying safe as you're getting older? Yes. Here's the caveat. This is why people come see you and other rehabilitation specialists. Is by the time they're in their 30s or 40s or older, they're already damaged from those bodybuilder movements. Therefore, they struggle to do the movements that I'm talking about now for the health purposes. So when we talk about exercising with purpose, let's start to change your exercise as your age changes.
Yeah, don't do a bodybuilder routine if bodybuilding isn't your goal or purpose, because I did this when I was young too, George. I looked at these programs that were on ESPN late at night. I used to stay awake just to see this 30-minute program because I liked lifting weights and I wanted to learn as much as I could about lifting weights. So I'd watch this late night program. It was a bodybuilding program. And then I'd go get the magazines off the rack, Flex Magazine and Muscle and Fitness. They were bodybuilding magazines. There was no weightlifting for football, or there was no weightlifting for strength and power. There wasn't any of that out there. It was all about bodybuilding. And I thought it was all the same. So I did a bodybuilding routine thinking that's going to help me play football better. And looking back, I just think, oh, how much better would I have been if I knew what I know now? Do the type of movements that are going to translate to your sport, and laying down and slowly pressing dumbbells up into the air is not translating to blocking a person, like you said, in a ballistic manner where it's more speed and power rather than pure brute strength. So, man, I fell in that trap too. So my point is, don't think that weightlifting is weightlifting, and if that guy looks really awesome in the gym, that I need to lift weights just like he does. Well, only if you're trying to achieve what he has. And that might be the case. You might think, I want to look like that bodybuilder. Well, you need to do a bodybuilding routine, but not if you're going into high school or college or professional football. You need to lift very differently than the professional bodybuilder.
Just to expand upon that a little more, when we talk about lifting differently, if you're trying to get really strong, we know for a fact that the hamstring muscles and your biceps are completely different ways of training to gain size and strength, and your glutes too, by the way, than your chest or your triceps or your back muscles or even your quad muscles. There's a
Explain that.
completely different way of training them to gain strength and size. So people will often have the same routine just because you can squat a certain amount of weight 25 times doesn't mean you should do 25 leg curls. You're in trouble if you do that. You want to go very, very heavy with leg curls if you do that, or something that targets the hamstrings with less repetitions. Same thing with glutes, with less repetitions. Now, if you're involving the entire lower body, it doesn't have to be less repetitions. But if you're trying to be specific to the biceps, you would go heavier weight, less reps. People who are doing these 1,000 crunches, you know, you wonder why you don't have a flat stomach, but you do all these crunches. That's not how your abdominals work, nor is it how you lose fat. Can't be done. So
right.
Let's get into the flexibility.
Okay,
let's get into the flexibility.
Hold on. I want you to explain this further, because this is something that I've never been exposed to, that in order to work your biceps, you need to do that extra heavy, or the hamstring or the glute. It needs to be done more heavy than the other muscle groups. Are you saying, what is the goal for doing them heavier? Or if you want to gain more strength, if you want to gain more muscle mass or hypertrophy, what's the goal for doing it that way versus maybe a quad or a shoulder movement?
So when you look at the muscles of the biceps and the hamstrings and the glutes, they don't look like or act like the other muscles in the body. They're more explosive. Look at what they do. Okay? So therefore they need more of that explosive, higher intense program or protocol, depending on your goal. So when you say, George, what are we looking at with the type of goal it is? Whatever the goal is, just identify that if you want to just do an overall health routine, do burpees and burst training and all that, and that's fine. But if you're trying to be a bodybuilder or be explosive, you have to train in that explosive manner, and recognize you don't train your quads with the same repetitions and weight, or not weight, same repetitions and sets as you would your hamstrings or your biceps or your glutes.
News to me.
Look at how the muscles of the hamstring are different, you know, when you look at how they operate in their energy systems than the quads. And it's interesting. Let's get into the flexibility now. I think there's still so many people who are confused by it. And for the people who don't listen to my radio show on the ticket, I want to bring that here, especially for the people who are listening here. Make sure you share this with your friends, because the only people that are going to see this are the people on my wall, Dr. Webster's wall. They're not going to see it all over the place. So please share this. But let's go into, when we talk about exercise with a purpose, a lot of people incorporate flexibility. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, I just want to emphasize that flexibility is not just one word that encompasses everything. Just because you can take your head and bend it to a certain degree, or take your arm and stretch it back as far, you know, to a certain angle, that doesn't necessarily mean you have flexibility or mobility in the proper place. So I think a lot of people get too wrapped up in doing gross flexibility movements, meaning just generally stretching across the joint, and thinking they're doing the right thing, and when in fact they could be harming themselves in some instances. Now, the reason I say that is because a lot of times when you would do something like, let's say a hurdler stretch, which is like a hamstring stretch, you might be gaining some flexibility in that muscle, but you might also be weakening the muscle if you're just doing a long duration, like a 60-second or a minute and a half static type of a stretch. And what I've found is beneficial is working more on the joint mobility along with some movement of the muscle and gaining flexibility in the muscle. But it's not just stretching the muscle and stretching the muscle and stretching the muscle, because eventually what you're going to end up, if you do that, is you're going to end up with muscle spasms and pain in that muscle, and you're going to end up with weakness in that muscle, and the likelihood of injuring that muscle goes up tremendously when you just do long duration static stretching on an individual muscle. So work more on the joints. For instance, if you need more flexibility in the neck, go to a chiropractor and get him to improve the mobility of all of the joints in the spine, and what you'll find is your motion is naturally better, rather than just cramming over and stretching all the time like that, which you are gaining some flexibility in the muscles, but the joints still aren't healthy and moving properly, and you don't have proper mechanics if you do that type of stretching.
So I have a different approach that worked for me years ago when I was in the service industry, and it complements what you're talking about. And that is to strengthen the opposing muscles. Often what happens when people are tight in their hamstrings, they can't bend over and touch their toes, their hip flexors, which is where you bring your knees up toward your chest, are weak. And that's usually from sitting for long periods of time. Your hamstrings are in the shortest position when you're sitting, and when you stand, you see a lot of people get up slowly because their hip flexors are very weak, and they're tight, and their hamstrings are tight. The last thing you want to do is bend over and stretch your hamstrings. The thing that you really want to do, in my experience, is to strengthen the opposing muscles, then go get your mobilization by a chiropractor like yourself. And I think it's a great compliment because, and I want you to elaborate on this, because when you have an adjustment by a chiropractor, it'll hold only for a certain period of time. However, when you do it consistently for a certain period of time, complemented with strength training that creates muscular balance, you will tend to hold in the position you're looking at holding versus having to rely on a chiropractor forever or a personal trainer forever.
Well put, yes. The chiropractor makes the joint more mobile so it's moving, but if the muscles aren't balanced and if they aren't strong, you get out of alignment isn't really the technical way to explain what happens, but your joints become stuck again very quickly if you don't have the proper muscle balance and the muscle strength. What you brought up about training the opposing muscle is interesting because that's actually easily explained neurologically. It's a neurological reflex between, let's say, your bicep and your tricep. They're opposing muscles. One causes your elbow to do this, the other causes your elbow to do this. So when you look at how those muscles go back, how the nerves, synapses in the spinal cord, when you flex your bicep or contract your bicep, it neurologically makes your tricep relax. If you flex your tricep, it makes your bicep relax. So it's exactly right. It's not something that you stumbled upon that has no scientific foundation. It's neurologically hardwired in you to contract or work the muscles, exercise the muscles, or strengthen the muscles in the front of the leg, cause relaxation in the muscles in the back of the leg, in other words, the hamstring. Would you say also strengthening the quadriceps through doing deadlift, like a powerlifting style deadlift or a squat, something that's very quad specific? Would that also, in your experience, help you relax the hamstrings?
It would, believe it or not. It might sound counterintuitive because you're bending over, you're about to lift weight up. And I would suggest that people do a burpee first if you have the ability and the strength to do it, because when you go into a burpee, you're essentially doing a deadlift on the way down and on the way up. But so you're practicing with your own body weight, or you can even do deadlifts with your own body weight. And it's called a hip thrust. And anybody who's watching this right now, if you want to strengthen your glutes without working your quads, a lot of females all of a sudden ding, ding, ding went off right now. You can do something called a hip thrust. And it's not anything new, but you'll see people doing it in the gym now. And you think it's a new exercise. You lay on your back, your feet are at about a 45-degree angle, and you lift your hips up really, really high to the ceiling, as high as you could possibly go. Not a little bit, as high as you could possibly go. Hold it for 1/1000 of a count, and then back down. All right, there's actually more to it than that. Well, you have to push through your heels and all these other different things. However, you'll often see guys with a bar across their hips. And their hips will lift really high with that bar and then down. And you're working your glutes, and you're working them big time. Because when you look at the muscle fibers of the glutes, they look like this. They work on that angle. So when you're doing that, you're actually forcing them together, and you're contracting those muscles like that. That's we're talking glute max and glute medius is a little bit of a different angle. So it's imperative to work those muscles first so you have the stability to do a deadlift. However, to answer your question, once you're able to perform a deadlift with weight, you then invariably work the weak muscles, the opposing muscles, because like I said earlier, you're working all 400 pairs of muscles all at once when you perform a heavy squat or a deadlift, and in some cases, not even a very heavy deadlift.
All right. So the bottom line here is, rather than just gross stretching or static stretching, try some chiropractic manipulation, try strength training of the opposite muscle, and you'll find that the flexibility will improve in the targeted muscle.
I think a lot of people might not know what the opposing muscles are. And so that's why I think it would be really beneficial to find somebody who works with a chiropractor like yourself, who also works with a trainer who knows what he or she is doing. So you can refer back and forth to each other from the business side, but also to help the patient. Because what's my mission that I've mentioned for 20-something years, even longer that I've known you? To bring a collective group of healthcare practitioners together to work in the best interest of the patient. I've been saying it, it's ad nauseum. It's just crazy because I really mean that. There's too many people who say, oh, I'm a personal trainer, I know everything. You don't need a chiropractor. And the chiropractors do the same thing. And the medical doctors and the nutritionists. Everybody thinks they're the best. What if you just worked in the best interest of the patient and they got all the results that they want, not what you want for them.
It's a good mission, George. It really is. I'm glad you do that.
Where do you want to go now, Doc?
We can mention sports performance. It's a little bit different than what we talked about. We can just talk about it briefly. With sports, what you'll find is the best people at their respective sports are usually the ones that can run the fastest, jump the highest, and change position, the position of their body quicker than the other people. It's almost always those are the people that are the best.
Let me add to that. Hold on. Let me add to that. And it's also the people who could change position while they're in the air. So think of a
position in the air,
and
but also planting one foot and then forcing themselves to go the opposite direction quicker than the other people can change direction.
I'm just expanding upon. I'm expanding
power, explosiveness. Excuse me.
I'm just expanding upon what you said.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what somebody generally wants when it's athletic performance. It's not raw. How much weight can you squat? It's how much force can you generate explosively and ballistically to get all the way up, not only onto your toes in full extension, but maybe even all the way off the ground. So there's certain types of exercise programs that you can use where you work out with resistance training, but it's more ballistic resistance training. There's a machine that our friend David Vibora has where it looks like you're doing a squat. It's made so that you can do an exact squat movement, but it's different because it only has resistance on the way up, and you can set it so that you have the right amount of resistance so that you can still jump all the way off the ground. And you think, well, if I jump off the ground with weight on my back, it's going to come back down. When I hit the ground, it's going to crush my spine. But this machine doesn't have any resistance going that way. If that makes any sense. It only has resistance when you push up on it, and then it just kind of just lightly comes back down with you, and then it has resistance when you go back up. So you're basically spinning a flywheel is what you're doing. So it only has resistance going in one direction, and you can push while you're jumping all the way off the ground, and you can gain a lot of explosive functional power doing that, rather than the bodybuilder's idea of slow all the way down, slow all the way up, and gaining maximum amount of muscle size.
So hold on.
Same looking movement, but very different outcomes.
So this is real important to qualify this, and that is, it would not be beneficial to train the way you just mentioned unless they were an athlete looking to be explosive, because the body movement needs the strength on the eccentric movement or the down movement. They need that resistance there because of the benefit you get. Yeah. We know for a fact, if you want to just get strong, not big, strong, it's 1 to 6 rep range. So, 1 rep is everything you can, all the weight you have, up to 6 reps only. And because of the energy source of the muscles, and it's the eccentric movement. So if you're performing chest, you have somebody there helping you. Heaviest weight you can move as slow as you can, and you do it for a count of 4 or 5 until you get to the bottom of that movement, and then it's up real fast. So it's completely opposite of what you said, and that's why the title of this show today is Exercise with Purpose, because you have to identify what your purpose is first before you decide to train a certain way. Otherwise, you could be hurt or even not gain benefit.
That's right, and that's why the people who win the World's Strongest Man competition, they're not usually really good at football. And the best football players in the world are usually not very good at the World's Strongest Man competition. They used to have the World's Strongest Man competition in the 70s, where they just invited people from like professional wrestling and football players and some power lifters. And you could see that they don't translate from one sport to the other. Oftentimes the football player who was the biggest, toughest, baddest football player in the world, he couldn't deadlift anything compared to this guy who's a power lifter. And the power lifter couldn't do anything where you're having to move things quickly through space. So it's all about how you train, what you train for. If you're a football player, don't think you need to get big, bulky muscles like the bodybuilder. I love that you mentioned that the 1 through 6 reps for the maximum strength. Another thing I can add to that, if you don't want any significant amount of muscle growth, but you want just pure strength, another type of training, which is very similar to what you said, is isometrics. Get on a machine in a locked position where maybe put 1,000 pounds on a machine where there's no way you can move it, and just push against it as hard as you can for a minute to a minute and a half. You're not going to move it a bit, but you're going to build a lot more strength than you will muscle mass in that case, which is entirely different than the bodybuilder who wants mass. And a bodybuilder doesn't care how strong they are. Now, the amateur guy in the gym might have this ego thing where he wants to lift the most weight of anybody in the gym. But the guy who, Dorian Yates or Ronnie Coleman, who go on stage, if they could only bench press 150 pounds, but yet they're the biggest bodybuilder in the world, they don't care. So they're not trying to build strength. They're trying to build muscle mass. And they work more in the, what would you say, 8 to 12 rep range for the muscle mass? Say that again?
10 to 12, yes.
Right. They're hitting failure there. And they're usually, a lot of times, they're grinding through really slow up and down, just grinding through that lift. It's grueling, but that's how you get the most muscle hypertrophy, as opposed to the strength, and certainly as opposed to the explosiveness. You will not develop sports explosiveness or functional strength if you grind through slow reps all day long. But you'll get big and you'll.
All right, let's wrap this up with joint health. Let's talk about joint health, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, joint health is really about kind of what we talked about earlier. It's about the mobility of the joint and keeping the muscles surrounding the joint on both sides of the joint in balance and strong. You have to have the balance, you have to have the strength, and you also have to have proper movement of the joint itself. And that's really kind of the chiropractor, physical therapist realm. But basically, if it comes to exercising for a purpose, make sure that you're not doing one type of movement and not the other type of movement or the opposing movement. That's the best advice I can give in general. In other words, don't live on the bench and say, I don't care about my back. I just want the big pecs and the shoulders. Don't do that. Otherwise, you're creating massive imbalance in the muscles that pull your shoulders forward, and you're lacking in the muscle strength to pull your shoulders back, and you're going to run into massive joint problems. You're going to get to the point where you have shoulder impingements, and you're going to put pressure on the nerves and the vascular supply of all the blood vessels and nerves that run through the shoulder, because your shoulders are going to be so far rolled forward that there's nowhere for them to run. And that's when you run into big problems: numbness in the arms, weakness in the arms, not even be able to feel your hands in some cases because you've cut off the blood supply. It's bad news when you don't keep balance from front to back when you're working out.
So I like to take a different
approach.
I've been to. Let's say it again. Yeah.
No, please, I want you to expand upon it.
Yeah, so mine is different. I've seen many surgeries. Friends of mine are doctors of all type, from you to orthopedic surgeons and so on. And I've gone to maybe 70, 80 surgeries. I've seen this with an orthopedic surgeon working on hands, wrist, wrist, shoulders, back, hips, knees, okay? And I've seen...
You can probably do surgery by now, right?
I've learned a whole lot. And what I learned, which was great to then bring to my clients at the time when I trained people, was I always knew the leg extension machine was bad for your knees. You know, you push the weight up, right? With your ankle.
It's just like the lateral raise for your shoulder.
Very bad. So like I mentioned earlier with the lateral raise, the further away a weight or resistance is from you, the worse it is for your joint. And so specifically to people who do pull downs behind the head, which is called a closed pack position, don't want to do that. There's no difference between this and this. When you're trying to work your back muscles, the difference is that one's safer and you don't change the primary mover, the one you're trying to work. So if you still have that old bodybuilder mentality and you have to do pull downs behind the back, you're working against your goal and it's not safe and you'll feel it in the future. However, let's get back to leg extensions. With a leg extension machine, if you want to do it, because they still use it in rehab today, and it's not bad for people.
But they're phasing away from that, George. They're quickly fading away from the leg extension, even in knee rehab. They're having people do more squat and lunge type movements and largely getting away from that shearing force of the leg extension, because it just doesn't work and it's doing more harm than good. So I'm glad they're fading away from that.
Right, and this is what I want to expand upon. I like to educate people because there are people who are still going to do it, like the inner and outer thigh machine that just makes me crazy. We won't go there. You know, girls think they're going to lose weight in their thighs that way, especially the inner side. Can't do it, impossible, and I'll give you $1 billion if I'm wrong. Doesn't work. It's not how fat loss works, and it doesn't work that way with the inner thighs. It doesn't work. Do you feel tight in that area? Yes. It's dangerous for you because you're working very small muscles and it affects the large muscles of the body. Your small muscles were not meant to work that way. They're called stabilizer muscles. They weren't meant to work with heavy weight. They were meant to complement large muscles. Anyway, that's 2 times I've gotten away from what I'm trying to say, but I like to expand upon it so I don't leave anybody hanging. The leg
That's why we love you, George.
Huh?
That's why we love you.
Yes. So
you always get back eventually.
Yes, it does. So that's my ADD kicking in. So what I learned from the orthopedic surgeon, Bob Scheinberg, here in Dallas, he's known as the hip specialist. He does a lot of hip surgeries that a lot of other docs don't want to do. Specific to the knee surgery, he said when you have when you're doing leg extensions, if this is your knee here, right, and this is your foot that you're pushing up, you have something called the patellar tendon. You know what that is. And when you lift here with all that weight, that patellar tendon pulls down. And when it pulls down, it's taking your kneecap and putting it against the cartilage. And so every time you go up and down, you have a shearing force, like you mentioned, Dr. Webster, on the cartilage, and you're wearing your cartilage away. Now,
this is what that looks like
when you get older anyway. So now you're exacerbating it at a young age with a lot of weight. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, I was just going to demonstrate. If people don't understand what we mean by that, imagine this is your lower leg, your foot's down here, and this is your knee joint, and we can move the knee right here. When you put weight here by your foot, you're getting this type of force on the knee. That's what a shearing force means. That's terrible on the ligaments and the integrity of your knee.
Right, and that patellar tendon pulls down on the kneecap. You get kneecap smashes on that, and it rubs away your cartilage.
Yeah.
And so
terrible.
So you know that's why I like to try to paint these pictures as much as possible, because it makes people think twice about doing certain exercises, because they're working against you, not for you. Do you get these great looking quadriceps? Yeah, but you can get them with squats and lunges as well. And if you're trying to be a bodybuilder, probably not a good exercise to do, really, for anybody. That's why
I've never.
The last thing to say, Doc. Last thing, and you know this. That's why immediately after surgery, when you have patellar tendon surgery, or even ligament surgery, right? Anything to do with your legs. Right after surgery, they put you on a bike. Right after.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, not once you're healed. Immediately after.
All right. You've got to keep it moving. Motion is life, especially when it comes to joint health. And sometimes I want to go back just briefly on what you said earlier, because I'd never really thought of it this way, but intuitively I've always known it deep down. You said, don't get the weight a long way from your joint, the muscle that you're working. So when you do this and the weight's out here and your shoulder's here, that's what we mean by that. Think of the other way to work your shoulder muscle is by holding a dumbbell right here. At the bottom of the movement, the weight's right above your shoulder. At the top of the movement, where's the weight? It's right above your shoulder. That's what you want. And in the case of all the movements that tend to be good and not harmful for that, it tends to be that way in all cases. The weight is directly above the joint and the muscle that's being primarily worked. So and you can see in the case of the leg extension, at the top of the movement, the weight's here, the knee is here, so that's clearly not what you want. As opposed to a squat where you stand up and your weight is all directly above your feet and your knees. It's all right above it. It's not extended out away from it.
So let me expand upon that even more, because it's important for the person who wants to work the side delt. When you push up over your head, you're getting more of the front deltoid, and you know that. Whenever you work a muscle, you want to work a muscle in the path of its motion. The side deltoid doesn't work this way. It works to the side. And so what I used to do is I would have someone, and I'll stand up for this, I would have someone bend their elbows. Okay, they would be like this. Can you see me? All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I would put my hands on their elbow here. And as they would come out, I would push down. And then I'd let them up easily, and then I would push down. So the eccentric movement, you're still doing the lateral movement. However, the weight's not so far away from you. To add to that, if you don't have somebody who can do that, nor do you want to do that, or it hurts, let's go back to what I said earlier, and that is deadlift, push-up, pull up. They work all of your shoulder, all of it.
Okay, I'm going to burst your bubble on this one, where we've got a place of disagreement. When you place weight on your elbow or weight on your arm extended out like that, that's physically exactly the same. You're getting the exact same shearing forces whether the weight is here at your elbow or way out in your hand out here. So I wouldn't advise doing that unless you're doing it in a safe range of motion, which would be letting off the weight at the top and only putting the weight when it's at the bottom, because the deltoid is working all the way from the bottom all the way up to there. So you can get side delt activation when your elbow's down to your side, and it's not as harmful. But when your elbow is up like this and you push down right there, it's still the same as that deltoid lateral raise.
And like I said, this is what I did 20 years ago when I was a trainer.
Yeah.
The thing to do, it was to move away from the machine and away from getting the weight so far away from you to bring it closer. And I would only have resistance on one part of the movement. I think the only place we disagree is the eccentric movement versus the concentric movement of where the resistance is. We want to wrap this up now?
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I think basically, yeah, I don't have anything else to say. Clearly, exercise is important. Exercise for your goal, and just do it. Bottom line, it's really the people who are sedentary are the people who suffer from all these problems, and hopefully you can see now how diverse the benefits of exercise truly are.
Let's make sure everybody shares this with their friends, please, because there's only people on my wall or Dr. Webster's wall that will see this. You have questions, you have comments, we'll still answer them after the video is posted. This video will be posted on 21 Day Body Makeover Facebook page. My website is 21daybodymakeover.com. Dr. Webster's is completehealth.com. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Complete